समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
The Union Home Minister and the Prime Minister have been promising that Maoism will be crushed in India by March next year. That date isn't an accident. It will be the 75th anniversary of the defeat of the first round of Maoist insurgency in Telangana. But Indian leaders have repeatedly succeeded in the war of Maoism only to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Today, in Security Code, I'll be explaining the story of how India succeeded in crushing Maoist rebellions time and again, only to lay the grounds for their resurgence by failing to address the real grievances of Adivasis and Dalits in the Maoist belt. 200 rupees, one bedsheet and a dhoti. Later, Gotu Lachanna would tell the villagers at a people's court that the police had paid him to guide them to a hideout near Kumarikunta one winter night. The price was low for the 6 Maoist insurgents the police captured. The insurgents were marched to a short distance and then shot in the back, Lachanna said. 2 guns, a bag of bombs and a radio were displayed as recoveries. 10 other cadres escaped into the darkness. The cadres are getting frustrated and are scared, a Maoist squad commander wrote in his diary after the killings. Even I am scared. To give others courage, I do not show my fear. Earlier this week, the Lok Sabha received a stark accounting of the collapse of an insurgency that was once said to threaten India. Since 2019, 1,106 Maoist cadres have been killed, 7,311 arrested, and 5,571 have surrendered. Fewer than 10 insurgents remain in the southern Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh zone, where hundreds once operated, police have said. Home Minister Amit Shah has vowed many times that India will be free of Maoists by March 2026. Similar promises have been made many times before, though, only to wither away. The upcoming new year will mark 75 years since the Communist Party of India withdrew from the Telangana armed struggle in 1951. Lachanna's 1969 encounter marked the collapse of a second Maoist wave. After the 1976 conviction of over 100 Maoist leaders, India Today magazine declared the Naxalite movement over and I quote, its leaders dead or jailed, its followers disillusioned. Well, it wrote again. Andhra Pradesh claimed to have destroyed Maoism in 2004. West Bengal crushed the Jungle Mahal uprising a decade later. Yet there's a hole at the heart of India's long war with the Maoists, a hole no number of dead bodies seems to fill. The Naxalite revolution squads entered the Srikakulam mountains in Andhra Pradesh in the mid-1960s, armed with scissors, combs and new clothing. Maoist cadres believed, you see, that it was important to demonstrate that Gonds and Koya Adivasis were in every sense physically like everyone else. Local customs like celebrations involving drinking were sternly discouraged. Women who traditionally wore few clothes were urged to cover up, and men were compelled to comb and cut their long hair. Political scientist Shanta Sinha has a great account of how non-compliance often led to forcible encounters with a large pair of gardening shears. Little imagination is needed to understand why the Sanghams or Maoist squads were welcomed into the Adivasi milieu. The uprising had been first driven by the brutalities of the Nizam's rule. Communist leader Puchalapalli Sundaraya has written, Dalits under the Nizam were bound by vetti, forced labor sucked out from each family. Landlords claimed a portion of the toddy the Adivasis tapped, the cloth produced by weavers, and the labor of carpenters and ironsmiths. Members of landlord families were carried across villages on the backs of Dalits in palanquins. Unpaid Dalits, I should add. Communal tensions sharpened in the course of the conflict against the Nizam. I quote again from Sundaraya, the Nizam and his mullahs tried to instill a feeling that the Muslims were the ruling class. In response, Hindu business interests and Arya Samaj activists rallied the so-called Hindu masses against their Muslim oppressors. Arming themselves with traditional muzzle-loading hunting guns and modern weapons they had looted from the police, the Communist Party of India began a guerrilla war against the Nizam and his Razakar militia, as well as the largely Hindu landlords who supported the regime. Razakars retaliated by massacring villagers, Communist leader Ravi Narayan Reddy recorded, burning settlements, executing suspects, and even burying people alive. In one incident, more than 50 young people were lined up and shot. Following growing tensions on the border between Hyderabad and India in 1948, remember Hyderabad hadn't yet acceded to the Union, Razakars ambushed Indian Army patrols in Nanaj, Khare Takli and Yelsangi. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru finally acted to compel the Nizam to accede. Led by Major General J.N. Chaudhary, S.N. Prasad's official history of the operation tells us, the Indian Army succeeded in overthrowing the Nizam's effete forces in just 5 days. To legitimize the accession, the Nizam was retained as the Raj Pramukh or governor, an act that obviously angered many who had suffered under his rule. The defeat of the Nizam led seamlessly on to war against the Communist Party's Sanghams. The government of India at the time, Prasad has written, feared, I quote, explosive possibilities of this situation reminiscent of Russia before the revolution. Army units herded Adivasi villagers into camps to cut them off from the guerrillas. Torture and extrajudicial killings, sadly, were commonplace. Contemporaries like Ravi Reddy have written. An official 1951 military intelligence report warned of severe shortages of food and water in the camps. The historians Sunil Purushottam and Jonathan Kennedy have recorded that illness and hunger were rampant. The Congress leader, Swami Ramananda Tirtha, warned that Adivasis were, I quote, seething with unrest. The army's campaign did, however, severely weaken the CPI's insurgency. Leaders like Ravi Reddy told the party leadership that many supporters of the insurgency welcomed the birth of the Indian Republic and wanted reforms in Hyderabad, not war. The CPI, under military pressure it could not resist, ended the rebellion in 1951 and entered electoral politics. For many Adivasis, though, independence brought very little relief. Corrupt officials and money lenders just replaced the Nizam's structure of exploitation. Local representatives of Adivasi communities often ended up serving forest contractors. Traditional Adivasi princes who had prospered under the Nizam continued to speak for poor Adivasis in the Legislative Assembly, even though, as Ravi Reddy observed, they had, I quote, not the remotest connection with tribal problems. Land seizures from landlords and Adivasi strikes rose again in the 1960s. This time, the momentum of the insurgent left also grew in West Bengal, where a rebellion broke out among tea workers in the village of Nakshalbari in 1967. The left-wing leader Charu Majumdar sought to consolidate the rebellion by calling for the annihilation of so-called class enemies, blithely ignoring questions of organization, training and tactics. The people, he vowed, and I quote, will fight the war with nails and teeth. A revolutionary cyclone will visit India. By the end of 1975, the people will complete writing the epic of liberation. For a moment, perhaps, it seemed possible. In 1968, 300 Adivasis led by Kunnikal Narayanan attacked police stations in northern Kerala. In Srikakulam, armed Adivasis targeted landlords and money lenders, displacing them from their homes and lands. 800 Adivasis even defeated police who were seeking a Maoist leader in the forests. But as in Telangana, the insurgents lacked the resources to face the Indian state. By 1970, Sinha writes, 2 CRPF battalions, 8 companies of the Andhra Pradesh police, and 6 platoons of the district armed reserve forces had choked the Maoist ranks to less than 30, down from several hundreds. Former Intelligence Bureau officer Amiya Samanta has shown that the West Bengal insurgency also disintegrated in the face of the government's often brutal counterinsurgency campaign. Learning from this defeat, 5 Maoist factions united under Kondapalli Sitaramayya to form what was called the People's War Group. This time they abandoned indiscriminate killings in favor of mass mobilization. Local political circumstances, ironically, helped this restructured Maoist challenge. Former movie star and soon-to-be Chief Minister N.T. Ramarao and his Telugu Desam party courted the Maoists in Andhra Pradesh, with Rao even calling them, I quote, true patriots misunderstood by the ruling classes. Later on, the Congress would return the favor by seeking and getting Maoist support in the 1989 elections. Andhra Pradesh's collapse reached its climax under Chief Minister Chenna Reddy in 1990, who allowed Maoist groups to operate freely. There are those who think this masterly inactivity actually ended up subverting the insurgency because it exposed the greed and corruption in the Maoist ranks. Whatever the truth, the PWG was again ground down by 2003. Its leadership retreated to the forests of Bastar as well as to remote regions in Maharashtra, Odisha, Bihar and Jharkhand. For the 4th time, Maoists had succeeded in protecting their insurgency from complete annihilation. The new CPI Maoist re-emerged from the surviving guerrilla factions in 2004. The government this time struggled to address an insurgency that operated in some of the country's least accessible, least governable regions with poor or non-existent road access. Among other things, the government armed a local militia in Chhattisgarh, Salva Judum, and relocated Adivasi communities to villages built along the roads. These measures fueled feuds, encouraged criminality, and often strengthened the legitimacy of the Maoists. The village relocation program, for its part, suffered from allegations of brutality, but from a counterinsurgency perspective, also ceded control of the interior of the forests to the Maoists. Even though state and central police suffered catastrophic losses in the years that followed, the build-up of a mass of counterinsurgency forces capable of operating deep in the forests began to tell. The killings of civilians and security forces slowly began to decline after 2010-2011. Once again, India had won. There will be a time, though, that security forces withdraw again. And sadly, the landscape they leave behind will be much as it was when they got there. Weak governance, corruption, and poverty continue to define Adivasi life. The introduction of industrial and mining projects has mainly benefited contractors, politicians, and officials. Benefited them anyway far more than it has helped Adivasis. The demographer Pankhuri Dubey has shown that Adivasis have been migrating out of Bastar on a permanent basis ever since independence. 200 rupees, one bedsheet and a dhoti. Each generation learns that the value of human life has barely changed in India's Adivasi heartland. There is absolutely no doubt that India is on the cusp of victory in its 4th Maoist war. But it's a victory that is shrouded in darkness. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.